The Star Wars universe is one of amazing advanced technologies. However, in order to run these technological wonders, they do require resources, fuel, electricity, and metals, etc. So, what would happen if the Star Wars universe was suddenly hit with a drastic shortage of these resources? Well, for this theory, we're going to be saying it's during the Clone Wars. Due to the increased demand of the Republican CIS war, it's ravaged almost the entire galaxy of natural tactical resources. And yes, this is very inaccurate, as the sheer size of the Star Wars galaxy means that they're not going to be running out of resources anytime soon, but for the fun of the theory, we're going to say that this happens. Now, we're mostly going to be concentrating on power and fuel. And we don't actually know how sustainable some forms of power are in the Star Wars universe, because there's so many different types of ways to create power, and different worlds will have different ways. However, we do know that many require finite resources. For example, starships and many worlds use a fuel source, one that can run out. So what's going to happen? Well, firstly, it's likely nearly all worlds will have a reserve of these resources, such as starship fuel, in case of an emergency. So there won't be an immediate outbreak. However, after a few days of tapping into the reserve, and as soon as the government realises that more fuel isn't coming, worlds such as Coruscant with high populations will likely need to enact martial law, forbidding the use of personal speeders and ships due to the crisis. They'll also likely ration power to sections of the city, meaning that at night time, power is likely shut off completely. Despite this, over time it will continue to be cut as power surges plague civilian areas due to the power generator's limited ability to produce power without enough fuel. Meanwhile, key government and defensive structures will be powered as the war between the two factions is still raging on, and they don't want to risk a CIS attack just because they don't have enough fuel. Public outcry will begin, and the Republic will likely be forced to bring in clones from their many battlefields to serve as riot protection. As in these times of conflict, people are going to demand that it's fixed. So you're looking at mass rioting and looting on the big residential worlds such as Coruscant. Despite this attempt to bring order, there is another problem. Nearly all of the clones' weapons, from their blasters to their stun batons, all require power. And this is becoming a fleeting commodity. Essentially, the Republic's going to be forced to use the very little energy remaining to keep the angry public at bay. Now, at this point, the war is all but forgotten about. It's stagnated. Starships will be forced to land due to a lack of fuel, and communication between High Command and the front would collapse, with countless Republic and Separatist troops being left on alien worlds without support or resources, and no way of communicating with their High Command. Now, believe it or not, the CIS, however, would be faring even worse. Their entire army relies on power, so not only will their ships and weapons die, but their entire army will be ineffective, as well as this a decent portion of their military commands such as Grievous and Kalani. This means that the Separatist worlds would descend into anarchy far quicker with rioting and looting, as basically their entire police force and security force is now gone. Now, eventually, the clones that were recalled to Coruscant and other key Republic worlds will not be able to hold the people back, and the citizens would likely take control and attempt to form their own government. However, a lot of worlds like Coruscant don't produce much of their own food, and they have no natural way to filter water without power. For this reason, anyone living on these worlds is more or less completely screwed. Without power, they don't have clean water, and they don't have enough land available to grow their own food. And they can't leave the planet because all starship fuel is gone. Realistically, disease would spread due to the amount of people and shut down medical facilities. It's likely people on worlds such as this would have to resort to cannibalism and create small factions that would fight amongst themselves. Realistically, megatropolis worlds like Coruscant, or for example Nar Shaddaa, would be the worst possible places to be. Now, as for agricultural worlds, ones with limited populations and clean flowing water and enough of an ecosystem to provide ample food, for example Kashyyyk, they would fare pretty well, as the Wookiees had lived in harmony with the environment for a very long time. Technology doesn't play a big enough part in their lives, so that its absence is going to cause absolute chaos. However, others such as Alderaan or Ryloth, worlds that do have their own agriculture and a relatively sustainable ecosystem, may not fail so well. They may be able to produce basic living resources, food and water, but without power there's still going to be public outcry. Not only this, but what about the non-native citizens to the world? I can guarantee you, many residents of these worlds would not be happy about sharing their resources with outsiders, and meanwhile the outsiders can't leave because again, there's no ships to take them anywhere. So conflict there is inevitable. Also, here's a kind of fun yet terrifying idea. What about the clones? They don't really know how to survive on their own. They're soldiers, they're not farmers, they're not hunters. So a legion of clone lands on your world absent of resources. They ask the locals for help, the locals don't want to share their resources with the clones naturally, so the clones butcher the residents and take their resources. Now this is a very realistic scenario. The clones without the command of the Republic would essentially just be bandits. So any world that had previously held clone garrisons or was an active combat site in the war would probably find themselves at the mercy of these clones. Now as all this is happening, I can assure you each world will find their own way to suffer as transport between different planets would be made impossible, so all forms of trade would be completely cut off. I also believe some organisations such as the Hutts would have made a greater reserve of fuel or would have quickly taken others when the crisis had started, attempting to seize on the situation. This means that factions like the Hutts or maybe even the Black Sun, who managed to keep some form of power and starship fuel, would begin to dominate the galaxy as tyrants and warlords, because they'd be the only ones with advanced technology. So you might be okay on your agricultural world, quite happy, but then the Hutts turn up and they have blasters because they saved fuel sources, and you're not going to be able to fight them. At this point, most of the technology would be almost useless. With it, a huge portion of the galaxy would have been wiped out in the damage caused, and even more would follow in the brutal, desperate worlds left behind. But what do you think about this scenario? And what worlds would fare best and what worlds would fare worst? Let me know what you guys think in the comments below. Thanks for watching, please remember to like, share and sub if you did enjoy, it's really appreciated and it helps the channel grow. Also don't forget to follow me on Twitter at @TheLoreGuy for regular updates. Thanks again for watching, I really do hope that you enjoyed, and I'll see you next time.